Silent Separation by Guman, Chapter 12.3. As it turns out, it can be proven that ancient saying makes sense and Yichen's instinct was also correct. Of course, a 27-year-old Zhao Mosheng was more sensible than when she was in her teens. However, a few habits that Yichen was familiar with clearly did not change with time or age. For example, she would act cheekily like a rascal if she could not win an argument against him. For example, she would like to stick to him more and more. And for example, she would give him the food she did not like to eat. And for example, while he secretly admit he actually enjoys them, moreover, it was really not easy to get those little habits to come back. The wedding banquet will be held, and 1.5 months later, Yichen intended to take some time off after the wedding banquet, so he was busy wrapping up all his cakes, which could be finished. Those cakes, which could be passed to other people, he had already done that. Earlier, he had also turned down being a special guest host on the TV show Legal Time. As for the preparations for the wedding banquet, compiling the invitation list, booking the restaurant, and etc., basically Yichen single-handedly took care of everything. In contrast, Mosheng had it really too easy. In fact, all these things can be handed over to a wedding planner, but Yichen apparently preferred to do them personally. Actually, Mosheng also had one problem causing her headache. She could not find a bridesmaid. Yimei was out of the question because she had quickly registered for a marriage license right after Lunar New Year. Xiaohun was even more inappropriate. When she heard about Mosheng's wedding, Xiaohun was mad and abolished Mosheng for concealing the true circumstances of her marriage from the good, honest, and innocent people. In the end, Mosheng had to treat her to several great meals to soothe her. When Mosheng mentioned about wanting her to being the bridesmaid, Xiaohun screamed. She said, "No, if I'm the bridesmaid again, I'll never get married." Xiaohun's frightened expression made Mosheng felt very guilty. There was also Xiao Xiao. After hearing from Yichen about the wedding, she called Mosheng, and her manner of speaking was a lot gentler than the last time they met. She even said she wanted to be the matchmaker. In short, Xiao Xiao also did not want to be a bridesmaid. Finally, the person chosen to be the bridesmaid was somewhat unexpected. That night, Yichen was in the bedroom looking at some important documents, so he instructed Mosheng not to talk to him. Mosheng was laying on the bed and writing the wedding invitations. The list was drafted earlier by Yichen, so she only needed to copy them neatly. But what could this word be? Yichen's writing was scarcely legible. Mosheng turned the paper this way and that way for a long time, yet she still did not know. Biting the pen, she asked Yichen. She looked up to see him concentrating his attention somewhere else. He had already said not to talk to him. "Forget it. Better not ask him. Just skip it and come back later." Of course, Mosheng is not an obedient person. Previously, while at the university, she was good at agreeing overtly but opposing in secret. But the Yichen at that time would at the most show only angry face and then lecture her with a few words. However, after they got married, it was different now. Yichen's way of punishing her was simply without any restraint. Truth to tell, Mosheng was truly afraid of him. Mosheng blushed thinking about it. Yichen like now, she could not have imagined back then. But how boring, copying some more. Mosheng could not take it anymore. She took a blank piece of paper and wrote a few words. "Yichen, I had a falling out with a colleague because of you." When done, she handed the note to him. This did not count as talking to him. Yichen initially intended to ignore her. He lifted his eyebrows and glanced at the note. This seemed serious, so he picked up a pen and wrote a reply. "How? Tao Yinzhen, do you remember her? She found out you and I already knew each other before. She's very angry because she thought I deliberately hide the truth. But how could I tell her given our relationship at that time? Yichen rubbed his eyebrows, wrote on a tiny piece of paper. Is it serious? Yes, very serious. I found an opportunity to explain in detail to her. I also asked her to be my bridesmaid and she has agreed, but she said she will not give a wrap packet. Indeed, very serious. Yichen threw away the tiny piece of paper into the trash can, and then he pulled her up. I think you're too bored. She buried herself in his arms. He held tightly onto her waist. She smiled happily and then tried to get up, her hands pushing at his chest to escape. The sweet scent from her recent bath fell to his nose. Yichen indulged himself for a split second. He had longed for all these for so long. From now on, no matter what, he would never let her go. A few days before the wedding banquet, the law firm had an unexpected visitor. On that day, Yichen had just returned from the prosecutor's office. Minton saw him and said immediately, Loi He, a woman has been waiting for you for a long time. Yichen looked at the direction her fingers pointed. Upon seeing him, the visitor stood up and in a graceful manner nodded at him to send her greeting. It was Pei Fei, Mushan's mother. Here's the tea. Minton put the tea on the coffee table in front of Pei Fei. Thank you, Pei Fei said politely and picked up her teacup. As a former mayor's wife, she was undoubtedly elegant and well-mannered. After Minton softly closed the door, a strange silence immediately filled the office. Pei Fei looked at the quiet young man sitting behind the desk and spoke first. We met in a hurry last time, but you should remember who I am. Of course, Yichen replied indifferently. Mrs. Zhao. His cool response made her a bit more skeptical, her facial expression all the more gentle when she said, You don't have to be so polite since you and Shaoshen are already married. In that case, you ought to call me mother-in-law. Yichen smiled faintly but did not say anything. Pei Fei smiled and said, If you're not used to it, you can call me Miss Pei. Miss Pei, Yichen accepted this suggestion. I'm very curious what is the purpose of your visit. Pei Fei sipped her tea, appearing more relaxed. We only said a few words last time, but Shaoshen praised you a lot. I came here merely to take a look and find out more about you. Loi He, don't worry. If Mushan knows you're so concerned about her, she'll be very happy. Pei Fei looked at the penetrating gaze of that young man, smiled affectionately, and said, Do you feel grievance for Shaoshen? Yichen replied expressionlessly, Mushan has never felt grievance, so why should I? Indeed, Pei Fei raised her eyebrows, sighed and said, From the time Shaoshen was little to now, I've never fulfilled my responsibility as a mother, partly because of a busy career and partly because I didn't get along with her father, so I neglected her. Fortunately, this child isn't very sensitive, so she grew up well. She paused for a while, seemingly to sigh with regret, and then added, In fact, I intend to make it up to her now, but I don't know if there's still a chance. After hearing her sincere confession, Yichen was still unmoved. Miss Pei, if you want to express material love, why do it in a roundabout way? I think you should talk to Mushan directly. Pei Fei carefully observed his expression. You seem to be quite hostile towards me. Probably you've got the wrong impression. And then an awkward silence. Pei Fei lifted her teacup again and blew on the tea leaves. After a long while, she said, Loi He, what kind of job do your parents do? If there's a chance, invite them to come out so that our families can formally meet. That is probably not possible because my parents have already passed away, Yichen said indifferently. Oh, I'm sorry. Pei Fei's tone was apologetic, but she did not appear surprised at all, as if she has already known. She thought for a moment and asked, They passed away because of illness? Yichen felt tedious again. Actually, Yichen has already guessed the purpose of Pei Fei's visit. She probably had recognized him, but did not know how much he knew what happened to his parents, so she asked so many indirect questions to prompt him. Yichen could certainly pretend not to know anything, but suddenly he was tired of this kind of beating around the bush incessantly. Miss Pei, he said in a flat tone, why do this in a roundabout way? Why not ask me directly if I know that my father's death is related to Mayor Zhao? Immediately after Yichen spoke, Pei Fengmei's gentle and benevolent mask disappeared instantly. She suddenly stood up, appearing strong while weak inside, and said, "You already knew, so why did you marry Shaoshen? To take revenge against us?" "I don't think I need to tell you why I got married." Before her questioning, Yichen answered coldly, "Besides, I don't have so much patience to plan such a long revenge." Pei Fengmei suspiciously looked closely at his facial expression for a long time before she said, "I do not believe you." Yichen said bluntly, "It doesn't matter if you believe me or not." Pei Fengmei froze and was stunned for words for a while and then said, "Does Shaoshen know about this?" "She doesn't need to know, and she'll never know," Yichen said dismissively. He had decided a long time ago that even if they did not end up together, he also would not tell her anything. It was enough that he shouldered this secret burden alone. Last time when Mushan asked him what did her father said to him, he deliberately misled her. Actually, what happened then was an accident. No one expected to turn out that way. Pei Fengmei's voice was soft. After all, it caused the loss of a human life, so the He family left a deep impression on her. Years later, when Mushan mentioned the name He Yichen, Pei Fengmei felt he seemed familiar. When she saw him, she became even more suspicious, so she decided to investigate farther because she felt very uneasy. Indeed, he was the He family's 10-year-old son at that time. However, she did not know if the young child knew how his father died, so she came to the law firm to find out. After she spoke so weakly, Yichen did not want to argue further. He stood up and opened the window. The fresh air outside suddenly rushed in. He looked out the window from the 10th floor. The sky was clear and the horizon spacious, helping somewhat to reduce Yichen's moodiness. When his father died, Yichen was about 10 years old. Although he was smart, but still not enough to understand the complexity of the adult world. He only remembered that one day, coming back from school, his father, who was healthy in the morning, was in the hospital, his body bloody and not breathing. Then his frail mother also became ill and passed away. He suddenly became an orphan. Fortunately, a neighbor who is also his father's comrade in arms adopted him. After he grew up, he gradually understood everything thoroughly. In the 1980s, Yichen's father borrowed money from the bank to invest in real estate. When the building construction was only half done, the bank changed its credit policy and demanded repayment in advance. Zhao Chunyan was governor of Y City Bank at that time, so he had the power to decide when to recall the loans. After Yichen's father's repeated attempt to solicit favor, Zhao Chunyan finally agreed to delay recalling his loans. However, Zhao Chunyan only agreed without meaning it, so the money and effort Yichen's father spent to delay having to repay his loans were useless. He has to repay his loans based on the new credit policy, so he had to abandon the building construction immediately. The building workers and material suppliers constantly demand the repayments of their debts. While on the run from debtor, he accidentally fell from an unfinished building and died instantly. In the meanwhile, Governor Zhao continued his meteoric rise in career, finally becoming mayor. Although he did not directly cause Yichen's father's death, he was undoubtedly the source of tragedy. Whenever Auntie saw Zhao Chunyan giving a speech on TV, she'll say to him, "Yichen, wait for it. This bad man will get his retribution one day." Yichen could never forget his extremely complicated feelings when he found out Mushan was actually Zhao Chunyan's daughter. Hatred, anger, pain, the absurdity of it all, he could not restrain himself and vented all the negative emotion toward Mushan when he saw her. Perhaps a part of it included self-loathing because even after knowing, he did not want to break up with Mushan. What he said at that time even pained him, so how could it affect Mushan any less? Moreover, he almost immediately regretted what he said. Yichen frowned and could not bear to think of that awful past. When that happened, he was still young. No matter how mature he was only 20 years old. He still did not know how to control and conceal his feelings, but he would never repeat the same mistake again. The owner of the law firm clearly had the intention of ending the conversation. Pei Fengmei realized she made a mistake coming in here. If he never intended on revenge, Her being here was unnecessary. If he intended on revenge, how could she stop him? Nonetheless, she did not want her trip to be worthless, so she lowered her voice and said softly, I hope you can give me an undertaking. Even if I'm not close to Shaoshen, I'm still her mother. A long time passed, but there was no response. Pei Fei has always been proud and arrogant, but she had lowered her self-esteem today for Mushan. She stood up and said, Since like this, I'm leaving. She got up and walked to the door. Just as she was about to turn the doorknob, she heard that overbearing young man painfully make an assertion. They gave me 10 years, but I want Mushan for a lifetime. His voice sounded tired. He paused and then said, I capitulate to the warmth of reality. Pei Fei was startled at first, and then realized what he said was the commitment she wanted from him. She turned around. The young man who was standing in front of the French window was shrouded in a layer of golden sunlight. His silhouette seemed desolate. Pei Fei did not have a chance to speak before she heard his faint request. Mushan loves to let her imagination run wild, so please don't let her know about these. The office was quiet once again, but Yichen could not concentrate on his work. Looking at the time, it was almost time to go home, so he might as well close his case files and deal with them tomorrow. The phone in his pocket rang. It was the ringtone of an incoming text message. It must be Zhao Mosheng. Checking the phone, it was really her. Yichen, I got a bonus today, so I'm treating you to a meal. I will be at your workplace right away. Yichen smiled happily, imagining someone looking amusedly proud of herself. When he was about to reply, the phone rang again. After he was done with the call, there were 2 more text messages. Didn't reply me? It is unlikely you are not around. Poor phone, where did Yichen misplace you? So impatient, Yichen helplessly shook his head. His phone conversation was no more than 10 minutes ago, so he quickly answered her. No need to come up. Wait for me downstairs. Yichen stood in front of the window, waiting for Mushan to appear. It seems like he may ask him before, how could he continue to wait so patiently? Actually, waiting had nothing to do with time. It was a habit, something that came about naturally. He could not control it. Mushan, who was carrying her camera, appeared in his line of vision. She stood under the shade of a tree across the street, her head bowed as she typed on her mobile phone. A moment later, a text message appeared on Yichen's phone. Yichen, I've arrived, so hurry down. Still the old rules, I'll count to 1,000.